Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yaming of Revolution. We got World War III heats up in the Middle East. U.S. bases being destroyed. But before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Salute.
Again, obliterate the... Donald Trump is panicking as Iran has more cards to play. Iran turning its attention to the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandab Strait after Donald Trump yesterday threatened to once again obliterate the Iranian civilization. Donald Trump gave an interview yesterday with state regime media, which calls itself Fox, and Donald Trump threatened to blow up all of the bridges, energy infrastructure, roads, and other infrastructure that Donald Trump believes at his whim he wants to destroy unless Iran decides they want to make a deal with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump says, they're telling me that they want to make a deal. Iran is saying, we don't want to make a deal at all. And Iran is saying, we're turning our attention to the Red Sea. The IRGC now putting out statements that we will ensure that all shipping traffic, not just in the Strait of Hormuz, but just in general in the region, is shut down so that the United States feels real pain. The IRGC strongly hinting that the Bab el-Mandab Strait in the Red Sea is next, that they're going to shut down the same way the IRGC in Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz right now. The IRGC, of course, allied with the Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis in Yemen previously demonstrated an ability to shut down traffic in the Red Sea, and they've just been waiting for the orders to be activated by Iran and by the IRGC. Donald Trump held an emergency meeting in the Situation Room last night. They then leaked that meeting to Barack Ravid over at Axios, who posted the following. Trump held a Situation Room meeting Tuesday to discuss a massive offensive in Iran that will be wider in scope than the current strikes around the Strait of Hormuz. 3 sources with knowledge said, and of course, Barack Ravid is the Trump regime's personal stenographer. He just puts out whatever they want the message to be for that day. And Barack Ravid was saying last night that the sources in the Situation Room meeting are saying the Trump regime is planning, quote, devastating strikes on strategic targets in Iran. And as I noted, Donald Trump threatened he was going to blow up all the bridges, energy infrastructure, desalinization plants. He used the word desalinization plants, and other civilian infrastructure as well. You just take a look, though, even what was happening yesterday in some of the massive strikes by the United States in Iran. At least 10 Iranians were killed and more than 15 wounded in a U.S. strike on the Iranian Army's 388th Mechanized Infantry Brigade in Bampur in southeastern Iran. And so a lot of these massive strikes that we're seeing by the United States are indeed having lots of casualties. But Iran is also responding very powerfully as well. Iran has been striking back in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Jordan, in the United Arab Emirates, and in other surrounding Arab nations. We've been covering those strikes. And of course, the IRGC warning the U.S. and U.S. allies, all energy export routes will be shut down. That includes the Red Sea. The IRGC statement, the enemy must expect the closure of other oil and gas export routes that serve the interest of the Americans and its allies. And one of the things that we've just seen in the past 48 hours, as Iran climbs the escalatory ladder, as Trump escalates the attacks on Iran, Iran has been, they've hit what, according to CENTCOM, Iran hit at least 7 tankers in and around the Strait of Hormuz in the past 7 days, and 4 tankers in the past 48 hours. And with respect to those 4 tankers, some of those tankers got pretty far outside of the Strait of Hormuz as well. And Iran has been shifting to using cruise missiles versus drones against these tankers. And the cruise missiles harder to avoid, more lethal, more damaging. And that's why we've seen a lot of these tankers, these images of these tankers just kind of sinking in the Persian Gulf. And we have lots of video of Iran striking these very large cargo containers and these very large cargo ships. Now, we've been sharing with you some of the footage of Iran's response. For example, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard set fire and destroyed U.S. military logistics and support center in Kuwait's Mina Abdullah port, an industrial and refining area in the south of Kuwait. Missile alert sirens in Bahrain, home of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, also struck. I'll show you this video right here of the Iranian Shahid drones slamming into U.S. interest in Kuwait. You can see for yourself. Play this clip. Iran has been releasing videos of the drones, of the ballistic missiles that they've been using. Here's one such video. And here's another video that Iranian forces released about their launch of retaliatory strikes targeting U.S. bases. Let's play this clip. Here's a photo of a possible Iranian ballistic missile impact on a U.S. base in Jordan as well. And I'll share with you this Iranian strike in Jordan. You can see the Patriot interceptors really aren't working that well with respect to the strikes coming from Iran. Here, play this clip. You have a map right here of the U.S. military bases targeted by Iran during the past 3 days as well. Iran's released satellite footage image of ballistic missile strikes of the U.S. base in Qatar, the Al Udeid base. Here we have the Fifth Fleet base in Bahrain, the command and control center, significantly damaged. Here, another command and control center in Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait, seriously damaged. But you take a look right here, folks, at the satellites and the marine traffic of the Strait of Hormuz, and you'll see there's pretty much zero traffic anywhere other than the Iranian route. As you know, the U.S. has reimposed the blockade, though, in the Persian Gulf. Iran has then shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and then the U.S. has blockaded Iranian ships. We've seen a few of these ships leave the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz, but there's no other shipping leaving at all. Iran has effectively shut it down, and they've demonstrated with cruise missiles, not even using the drones anymore, that they're just going to blow up each ship. I mean, 7 ships in 7 days, any ship the U.S. Navy tries to escort, Iran is blowing up. Remember what I've been saying now? I've sounded like a broken record when I've been talking about these strategic petroleum reserves, and I've been saying crack spreads, 3-2-1 crack spreads. And you're probably like, Ben, why have you been saying this for weeks and weeks and weeks? Because I knew how important it is. And so the crack spread price per barrel has now hit $68 per barrel right now, which is like the highest ever. And the crack spread is the difference between the price of crude, which, by the way, is going up. And I think in the next 48 hours will probably be close to $90 a barrel, maybe even higher. It's already past 80. But that crack spread is the difference between that and the price at the refineries. And so now both the price of crude and So the crack spreads going up with it, and the refinery price are both going up, significantly at the same time. Oil crack spreads are going out of control, which is a strong signal of incoming shortages, especially in diesel. And that's precisely one of the things that I've been warning about happening. Now, with all of this taking place, last night, Donald Trump has been posting weird photos of himself at UFC fights, weird photos of himself with Xi Jinping, more weird photos of himself, Xi Jinping, a photo of a statue, and he writes "clean" on it. And, and then he gave that real demented interview with state regime media Fox, where he claims that Iran wants to talk to him. They're trying to make a deal with him, just completely and utter lies and just totally deranged. Here, play this clip.
3 days ago, we had a deal.
When was the last time you spoke with an Iranian official?
Well, not me, but let's say my representatives. I have spoken to them, but my representatives over the course of, actually, an hour ago.
And what message was delivered?
They want to make a deal, but every time they make a deal, they break it. They don't want to die. People don't want to die. About an hour ago.
And what message was delivered?
You better make a deal. You're not going to have anybody left. We're being very careful with the civilian population, as you know, but I said, you better make a deal. You're not going to have anything left.
And you think they will?
They should. I don't know if they will or not.
Sir, thank you for speaking with Fox News.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And then after coming up with that lie, Donald Trump then says, Iran, they lie about everything. All they do is lie. Here's what he says. Let's play this clip.
They said they didn't want a nuclear weapon.
Well, they say that. Everything they say is a lie. They lie. I've never seen anything like it. They also come out and they'll tell you we never discussed nuclear, and we're in a room for 5 hours. That's all we discussed. And they'll walk out and say, nuclear was not discussed. Everything was discussed.
And then, even though we know the Strait of Hormuz is closed, Donald Trump pretends that it's open. I'll share this with you.
On Monday, you announced that the United States is reimposing the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports.
Started now.
Shipping data trackers indicate that just 10 vessels passed through the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, less than 10% of what normally goes through this critical waterway. When you say the strait is open, what do you mean?
It's open if people want to go through it. We're not opening it for Iran. That's the only one it's closed for. It's closed for Iran, both in and out, but it's open now. A lot of things have happened, Trey, in the last few months. Pipelines are being built. We're coming up with great alternatives, including Texas, including Alaska.
You've called.
And here's where Donald Trump said he's going to blow up their power plants. Let's play it.
Do you anticipate that the strikes we're seeing this week against Iran will expand? Are you considering hitting energy targets or other locations inside of Iran?
I'll save the energy targets for last, but ultimately we'll hit energy targets, yeah. But we're going to hit them very hard tonight. We're going to hit them very hard tomorrow night. We're going to hit them very hard the night after. And then next week, it gets really bad for them because next week comes the power plants. Next week comes the bridges. We're going to knock out all their power plants. We're going to knock out all their bridges unless they get to the table and negotiate.
And then, as I shared with you yesterday, I just want to show it to you one more time, that Iran's deputy foreign minister posted, or he was giving an interview, Garbabadi, and here's what he had to say. He goes, "We're not negotiating with him. There's nothing else to talk about. There's just full-fledged war in the region right now with really no way out." Here's what he has to say. Let's play this clip.
Iran did not leave the negotiating table. It was America that stalled the Islamabad memorandum, and we, in fact, did not take any action in this regard. So look, the idea that they want Iran to return is a request that will not be realized. The Islamic Republic of Iran will not be the first country to request negotiations in the face of these criminal American actions. We will not request negotiations with America. If America thinks that by tightening its circle of actions against us, military actions, economic sanctions, we will ask to go back and negotiate, it is mistaken.
We are a nation
definitely.
of resistance.
They are mistaken. Secondly, if they think we will widen the Strait of Hormuz, they are mistaken about that too. This is currently a very key capacity. These two actions will not happen.
There you have it, folks. Let me know what you think. We'll keep you posted, of course.
Tensions are rising between Iran and the United States, and the American president is now saying that they're going to increase the attacks next week if the Iranians don't return to the negotiating tables. Iran is attacking more heavily, but the United States is now killing civilians and targeting civilian infrastructure. Trump is threatening to also target Iran's power plants too. Where are things going? And who will be the side that will intensify further before the other? Let's begin with the recent statement of Donald Trump. Donald Trump stated that there will be harder hits. Iran will be hit hard over the coming days. And he also mentioned in a televised speech that Iran's power plants will be attacked too. Talks about a ground invasion to force the opening of the Strait of Hormuz as well, following repeated strikes of the U.S. terror forces against Iran's civilian infrastructure. Now, the American side, we have more revelations from the United States speaking about Trump's knowledge and approval of the attacks against Iran 1 week before the deterioration. So, in essence, when the United States attacked Iran because they claimed Iran was targeting ships that were breaching the MOU that the United States signed, he already knew, he already had a plan, and he was just using these Iranian measures as an excuse. He knew in advance and he wanted to have this escalation because clearly things weren't going his way in the negotiations. He thought that by applying pressure before, Iran would concede. Now Iran isn't conceding. And we have a situation where he already approved the war. So how far is he going to reach? Well, chances are they're going to escalate even further because now the United States is targeting the civilian infrastructure, wheat, mineral water factories. That's what they're targeting. Reminds you of something? Israel. The United States is Israel now on a larger scale against Iran. That's what they're doing. But there were also casualties in Iran. Dozens of people were killed and wounded, and over 10 of the Iranian armed forces were martyred during the American attacks against the country. But Iran also had retaliation. Iran targeted multiple assets in the region following the American escalation. And they also sent a message to the Kuwaiti people. They're sending messages to the people now, like they sent a message to the Jordanian people that we spoke about yesterday. The Revolutionary Guard targets U.S. military installations in Kuwait, and they told the Kuwaiti people the following after, of course, they targeted the bases of the United States in Kuwait. In the sixth wave Operation Nasr 2, missiles, drones targeting Patriot air defense complex and the supply depot of the U.S. military base in Kuwait. They also targeted and destroyed HIMARS missile launch platform, the satellite comm center, and air defense, air missile defense radar as a response to the American aggression. They said to the Kuwaiti people that Tehran harbors no animosity towards them, but rather loves them for their honor and nobility. They pointed out that the operation was nothing but a response to the crimes of the U.S. Since more than 4 months ago, the American army started the war after the assassination of Mr. Ali Khamenei. The Guard indicated the source of many of the attacks in this war is the bases of the occupying American forces located in the sacred land of Kuwait. The Guard expected that the Kuwaiti people would not miss any opportunity to destroy the aggressive American institutions and liberate Islamic lands from the bases of the occupiers. The pure land of Kuwait should not be under the occupation of criminals who killed 70,000 Palestinians, including 20,000 children. What we expect from you, the Muslim and generous people, is to expel the occupiers from your land. What we have in essence here is the IRGC calling for a wide revolution. That's what I believe. This is the situation that we reach now, especially after the American aggression on the civilian institutions and the escalations of the United States. And Iran, in essence, is happy to give them aerial support. They will give them the backing with the attacks. And they're calling for the people to take action because the United States is occupying, in essence, these lands, whether or not it's with the approval of their own governments, because at the end of the day, they're using them as terror hubs to go and attack other countries. And some of the rulers in the Gulf states, in essence, are ruling over their people without their consent or without anything. So Iran is telling them, take action to what? Expel the U.S. terror forces. Is that going to create a certain movement? There's a very high likelihood that it will, especially in a couple of countries in the Gulf, like Bahrain. You might see some movements, Kuwait too. And by the way, they already had certain moves to try and prevent something from happening on the ground, because the people are sick of their governments at the end of the day. They're sick of this narrative. They're sick of the propaganda in the mainstream Arab media as well about Iran being the aggressor and them not saying a word about their own country's complicity in attacks against Iran. So don't be surprised if something like that happens. Not that Iran is relying on it, by the way. Iran has enough force to teach the child-killing American and Israeli terror forces a lesson and anyone allied with them. But the people are sick of this propaganda. And look at the recent propaganda from Saudi Arabia. This is a recent propaganda video from Saudi Arabia. Look at what they're doing. They're showing you air defense systems near Mecca. Can you imagine that? Why would you have to have air defenses near Mecca? Has anyone thought about that? Who would want to target it? Or are you doing something in the vicinity? What are they doing in the vicinity? They're allowing U.S. forces, Fahd Air Base, and they're allowing the United States to use it. And of course, we're talking about the areas near Mecca. And then they publish these propaganda videos about Mecca and the fact that, oh yeah, we're going to defend it. Defend it from... You're participating in killing innocent people in Iran. That's what you're doing. Now, Iran doesn't need the help of anyone because there's a lot of damage, especially in the recent attacks of Iran. So this was recent damage in Al-Udaid, according to satellite images that were published recently, before and after. Significant, substantial damage. Then we have other footage of the recent Iranian attacks as well. This is the 5th Fleet in Bahrain. Have a look at this. And this was a landing moment when Iran targeted warehouses belonging to KGL, according to reports, U.S. military logistics suppliers. Have a look at this. So that was an Iranian drone landing there. And also a recent video showed that Iran might be using cluster warheads now in Bahrain against the U.S. forces in Bahrain, as we can see in this video over here. So everything is escalating. And there were also other videos coming from Iran of their recent attack. Let's have a look at some of the videos that were published recently. This is footage of Iranian missiles landing on a U.S. base in Jordan. So you can see how it evaded the air defense systems. Have a look at this. So that was one of the videos that was published. And here's a clearer one. Look at that. So the United States air defense systems are in essence worthless against Iran. And by the way, do not be surprised. Look at that. Look at how it passes the air defenses of the United States. In key bases in Jordan, by the way, we're talking about hangars with F-18s and significant equipment and Air Force. Look at that. Look at missile after missile. None of the American air defense missiles are working. Look at that. Third landing here. No answer whatsoever. Iran could be using this as a strategy, by the way, to further deplete whatever remains from the American air defense systems. Don't be surprised. Like there was a recent report that Israel is also dealing with some of the final air defense missiles that they have. All of this attempt of the United States to control the tempo of the war of attrition with Iran, because we're clearly looking at something long-term here, would bite the United States back, because Iran is using missiles that would require air defenses to be activated. And the United States would be losing more of its missiles. Likewise with Israel, should the United States have to pass them more missiles. Now, what did the IRGC say? There was a statement of the recent attacks coming from the IRGC. I'll keep this video for you so you can see the recent attacks. But the IRGC said several things relating to the recent developments. Apart from the messages that they sent to the people of Kuwait, they reported they attacked, of course, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, according to statement number 12. They said that the NSA Management Center, Command and Control Center, large warehouse of parts of military equipment, fuel tanks of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain were destroyed. Sheikh Isa in Bahrain, several warehouses containing weapons and parts of enemy vessels and aircraft were destroyed. Ali Salim in Kuwait, where MQ-9 drone platforms were hit, according to the statement of the IRGC. Iran's National Army also said that it conducted the 8th phase of its Sa'iqa, or lightning operations, targeting U.S. strategic centers in Jordan for the second time. According to the Army statement, the position of F-18 fighter jets and large equipment drones, large equipment warehouse of the terrorist U.S. Army in Al-Azraq base were targeted by destructive drones. The Army says it carried out 6 phases of drone operations against U.S. bases, according to their statement, since what it called the U.S. violation of the ceasefire. And because we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz, and now there are hints that the IRGC, Iran, in essence, is going to be closing another strait, another big hint for Bab el-Mandeb. They said regarding the Strait of Hormuz that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed up until the end of America's mischief. They need to behave. The enemy should know that now that its pirates have blocked the export route of oil and gas to the world from the Indian Ocean, endangering the interests of American economic rivals, it should expect other export routes supplying the US and allied interests to be blocked. So that is an outright confirmation almost that Bab el-Mandeb is going to be shut and there's going to be an economic disaster. Why? Because a pedophile president of the United States of America who's blackmailed by the Zionist child-murdering Netanyahu and their allies, their corrupt child-killing pedophile elite allies who run the world, are concerned and only wanting to protect this genocidal colony of Israel and have endless wars to support the military-industrial complex so they can profiteer from it. They don't give a damn about people, and if this destroys the economy of people and people have to pay more for fuel or energy or food or whatever it is, so long as the satanic genocidal death cult of Israel is fine and it's protected. Oil and gas exports from the region are either for everyone or for no one. Iran is having none of it. Now, the lunatic Trump is at the same time saying that there were certain rounds of negotiations, and he contradicts himself so much. I don't want to talk, and then he say we had 11 hours talk rounds in Oman, and the Iranians are asking us, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, but the ones who are bad, he's all over the place. If he thinks this is like strategic ambiguity or something, he's a major fool. Likewise with any idiot who still believes in him. But the fact of the matter is, he made a decision. Trump made a decision. And that decision, where it's in his hands or not, because he is at the end of the day the commander-in-chief, he made a decision to try again and force Iran to surrender. And guess what? Iran isn't going to surrender. The free people of the world aren't going to surrender, not just Iran. Iran just happens to be the representation of human dignity now. Iran and its resistance to the neo-colonialist, supremacist, ugly, depraved, disgusting powers who murder children and rape them. He has much more pressing things to do in the United States, Trump, if he wants to protect the American people and American children. Do you know all of that money he spent so far on this war of aggression against Iran? Had he spent that money, and he didn't have to do this, right? He did this for Israel. Had he spent that money in the United States, he would have solved the healthcare problem. He would have solved the poverty. He would have sent free meals for school children. He would have sorted out families that are suffering. He would have solved major issues in the United States for the people who are in need the most. Instead, what does he do? He goes on a war of aggression because he's being blackmailed by a satanic child-murdering entity in the form of Israel. And his allies are entertaining it. As in, they're speaking about Iran, as in how dare Iran respond. They're causing instability. How far is he willing to go? Well, clearly by the movements of the United States lately, they're trying to only control the tempo so that it doesn't get out of hand and they can continuously apply pressure on Iran. That's what they're trying to do, and mislead some in Iran with potential talks, which are clearly now appearing to be a total and absolute waste of time with Donald Trump. It's a complete waste of time. As in, if you ask me, the Iranians are entitled to do whatever they want to do from a political perspective, but from what I'm seeing now, these talks with the United States, you gave the idiot 3 chances when he constantly backstabbed the Iranian people and butchered Iranian children. And clearly the only language that the American administration understands is the language of force. They don't understand any other language. At least when Trump is there. Because listen, let's remember, no matter what you think of any of the American presidents, most of them were vile, despicable murderers. But none of them went to war with Iran. Even when they were requested to go. This idiot did. And that says a lot about him. So in essence, by the way, because Trump has been talking about Iran potentially assassinating him, the U.S. armed forces would probably be relieved if they hear that Trump has been assassinated. Because he's the one killing them, throwing them into the fire by provoking other countries. It's insane. And you know what it stems from, by the way? A lot of this stems from the neo-colonial, arrogant, racist, supremacist mentality. Nothing else. Look at history. Colonial powers originating from Europe, occupying and butchering the rest of the world and stealing their reserves, their goods, their everything. And then crying when they come and immigrate to Europe, saying, oh no, we don't want immigrants. They're still doing the same thing. They're just coating it with different stuff. Now it's Iran's problem that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. What do you mean Iran's problem? The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Imagine China building a military base on American borders or in Europe somewhere and aiming ballistic missiles against neighboring countries and then complaining once they attack them and they respond. What kind of a delusional mentality is this? What are these people so thick and stupid that they can't see through this? Is there anyone else still not understanding this? Is there anyone convinced that Iran is the problem here? I'm not sure how these people think, or are they so arrogant and delusional that they lost any sort of common sense? Because arrogance comes with ignorance, by the way. These supremacists who think that, so long as it's Western powers attacking other countries, it's fine. Now, and many of the European countries, if not most of them, are on Trump's side, licking his boots when he's swearing at them and humiliating them, whether it's NATO or any of the other countries. Some of them know, some of them, they have limits, right? To an extent, by the way, because none of them cross the red lines when it comes to Israel, especially. And there's a part of the problem. So the demons in Washington, the demons in London, the demons in Berlin are just as bad as the demons in Tel Aviv, simply by entertaining any of this. If they don't take a staunch position against the aggression of the United States against Iran, they will be their people will be facing the same problems at the end of the day. And Iran so far has been restrained. Iran didn't go all out. They always kept some space there. But Trump, by what he's doing, is potentially provoking Iran to have bigger attacks. And who knows, he might go on an even bigger attack against Iran. And don't be surprised if he will use a nuclear bomb, tactical nuclear bombs against Iran. Mind you, the Iranian people will bravely stand up even with his nuclear bombs or not, by the way. Don't worry. Do you remember the human shields that the Iranian people made around their power plants? Talking about a nation of victory or martyrdom. And that's something that no corrupt genocidal pedo will understand. They're not at the same level. However, Trump is clearly willing to. And Netanyahu, on the other hand, is interested in him doing just that. Because so far Israel is kind of out of the picture. They started this and they're out of it. So in essence, look at how much they're benefiting. They dragged the United States into a war. They got out, and now the United States is doing the war on its own.
So Trump is now, for the first time, openly talking about threatening, blowing up, taking out Pickaxe Mountain, which is Iran's crown jewel, their most fortified nuclear safe sites, nuclear locations. And how would you have to do that? All the experts agree you could only do that with a tactical nuclear weapon, and even that might not be enough. And guess who's not going to be opposed to that idea? Benjamin Netanyahu, who, by the way, visited Dimona, yes, that Dimona, Israel's secret nuclear facility, just yesterday. Netanyahu publicly threatened to use nuclear weapons against Iran, not explicitly, but implicitly, while speaking in Dimona. Some people in Iran are still under the impression that, like, the memorandum of understanding is like a real document that the United States wanted to uphold, but they just couldn't. And from the very first day, it was so obvious that this was a horrible plan. This was a plan only to allow the United States to build up more troops in the region. 82nd Airborne Division. They've sent the Marine Expeditionary Units to West Asia, wherever in West Asia, I don't know, to get more air defenses and standoff munitions to the region as well. That was the plan the whole time, okay? And right now, what we are witnessing is the war before the war. We are witnessing the Battle of Hormuz, I've seen people call it. And frankly speaking, I don't understand the logic of a country that says, well, as long as you don't bomb our capital city, we are going to kind of just be a little bit hands-off in our retaliation to you wherever else you decide to bomb. So if you decide to bomb southern Iran, if you decide to bomb the coastal areas in western Iran, then we're not going to do too much. You know, we're going to try to, go to Pakistan again, go to Oman again, and we're going to try to negotiate this all out. And that is not, from what I can see, the opinion of the supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. He is seemingly of a different sort of mindset, and these two mindsets of Ghalibaf and Pezeshkian and Arakchi versus the mindset of the supreme leader. and some of the people that he selected to speak at the funeral procession, the burial and mashad of his father, the martyred leader Sayyid Ali Khamenei, like Dr. Sayyid Jalili and Ali Ahmed Khomeini, the grandson of Imam Khomeini, who have a different approach, which is a different mindset, saying, we're not hopeful at all about this MOU. We'll hope that it goes well. And, here are our red lines. And as soon as the red lines are being violated, we need to respond. So the United States is bombing left and right. They are trying to shove these ships through the Omani route in the Strait of Hormuz. And we are seeing a lot of increased action from the Iranians. I'm going to go into some of that in a moment here in our next story. But first, I want to show you just how serious the U.S. is right now about escalating this war into unthinkable worlds, against Iran. I mean, it is absolutely insane. There is no hope whatsoever that anyone should have that this can just be negotiated out. This can be hammered out in some talks in Islamabad or in Muscat. That's not going to happen. So let's take a look at this. For starters, we have this. I mean, my God. President Trump has formally notified the U.S. Congress that the U.S. is at war with Iran. The move gives Trump another 60 days to use the military in the region without congressional approval. Trump said strikes that began on July 7th represent military action consistent with my responsibility to protect Americans and U.S. interests both at home and abroad. Trump also just said that he will hit Iran hard tonight amid mounting tensions. So this is all the proof you need to see that the war is on. The war has been officially declared by Donald Trump, and he has 60 days before Congress can take a vote on whether or not they support this war or oppose this war using the War Powers Resolution. So he's got 60 days. War is on. This is the war before the war, the Battle of Hormuz, whatever you want to call it. Trump is also going to be delivering an important speech to the nation 9 p.m. on Thursday. Now, this might be the formal declaration of war that he has already conveyed to Congress. I don't know. We don't know what this is about, but it has attracted some big headlines. We saw intense attacks from the United States on several regions of Iran, on coastal regions in southern Iran over the past 24 hours. Let's take a look at some of these. U.S. is hitting what seem to be relatively unimportant targets in these regions. They, of course, are failing at these assassination strikes. They hit Kish, Bushehr, strikes very, very close next to the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Thank God there were, the active workflow was not interrupted. Jask, Bandar Kangan, Chabahar, Bandar Abbas. Personally, I believe that the U.S. is going to try and stage some sort of a forward operating base in Chabahar as the next round of aggression begins in a big way. Most of these strikes that you're seeing right now are going to be targeted at radar systems, air defense systems, which are very hard to hit because these air defense systems are mobile. These radars get replaced within a matter of, an hour on these coastal regions. So, what are they doing? They're trying to soften up the coastline. They're trying to soften up the southern regions of Iran in anticipation for what we all believe is coming, some sort of an operation to try and do some landing operation either on Kashim Island, Kish Island, Karg Island, or in Chabahar port. Okay. Now, this was a big mistake that Bahrain, forced error from Bahrain. HIMARS missiles were launched at Iran late last night or early this morning. You can view it about 3:17 a.m. local time in Tehran from Bahrain. HIMARS missiles being launched from Bahrain is a huge escalation, and it drew a very large response from Iran that is actually still ongoing. I mean, I'm seeing reports Khorramshahr missiles launch at Bahrain. You see these massive submunitions spraying all across Bahrain. Dozens of explosions reported every few minutes. So the situation in Bahrain is not good. And as we read that, there are renewed explosions in Bandar Abbas, Keshem Island in southern Iran. About 20 minutes ago, explosions in the city of Abbas in southern Iran. So the strikes continue. Of course, it is not true that they have nothing. I mean, Iran is doing extensive damage. Over the past 24 hours, again, we're going to cover this in our next story. They hit radar installations, drone logistics sites, factories and manufacturing plants of drones at these U.S. bases all across the region. They even did quite a bit of damage to Jordan. But the U.S. is very content with the idea of escalating the situation beyond just strikes on the coastal areas, strikes on unimportant infrastructure in the southern regions. There have been reports that water and electricity infrastructure on Iran's Kish Island were hit. Again, hitting any water, electricity infrastructure is a big no-no for Iran. That's a huge red line. Kish is a civilian resort area in the Persian Gulf, home to roughly 40,000 people and one of Iran's main free trade zones. Now, also, this is very interesting series of reports I want to go through. CNN has released exclusive satellite data showing that Iran has started rebuilding the Talikan 2 nuclear site in Parchin. Talikan 2 is a heavily fortified high explosives testing chamber suspected to have played an important role during Iran's covert AMAD nuclear weapons program in the early 2000s. It was rapidly expanded before the recent war. The site was buried with sand by Iranian military engineers shortly before the attacks, attempting to protect the internal structure from severe damage. It seems all 3 holes in the roof have now been fixed. But even more damning for those who want to maintain peace, maintain some sort of stability in the region is this story right here, another nuclear story. This was reported earlier today in the early morning hours. A few hours ago, so afternoon time yesterday in the United States, President Trump said the U.S. would take out Iran's most deeply fortified underground nuclear site called Pickaxe Mountain near Natanz. Listen to this closely. If you haven't listened to any story in this stream thus far, listen to this closely. Pickaxe Mountain is located more than 100 meters underground beneath a mountain made of pure granite, one of the hardest rocks in existence. It is several times deeper and more hardened than Fordow, which itself was likely only marginally damaged. It is presumed to be the location, Pickaxe, of Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile and possibly covert enrichment cascade halls. The site is so well fortified that the U.S. did not even attempt to target it in 2025 or 2026. Most analysts agree that Pickaxe Mountain could only be taken out by a tactical nuclear weapon, and even then, success is not assured. So Trump is now, for the first time, openly talking about threatening, blowing up, taking out Pickaxe Mountain, which is Iran's crown jewel, their most fortified nuclear safe sites, nuclear locations. And how would you have to do that? All the experts agree you could only do that with a tactical nuclear weapon, and even that might not be enough. Now, this is a very, very dangerous genie that cannot be put back in the bottle. Pickaxe Mountain nuclear site is the elephant in the room that nobody has been talking about. It almost certainly holds Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. It is very likely a covert enrichment site. We know for sure that at least some centrifuges were moved to a hull below the mountain. Both sides are conveniently silent about this. Iran has been actively expanding it during and after the recent wars. Why does nobody in the U.S. talk about this site until now? Because it's basically impossible to take out. Once they point it out, something has to be done about it. That means one of two things: tactical nuclear weapons or a ground operation. It's very possible, by the way, that this was one of the targets that the U.S. had under its scope, under its sights during the Ramadan war. But after their failed operation in Isfahan that went nowhere but into ash and rubble and flames, with a bunch of Air Force cargo jets being burned to the ground near Isfahan, that this was tossed out to the side, and they said, we're going to have a memorandum of understanding and come back and revisit this one at a later date. Well, now they are visiting it once more. And it's very concerning, very concerning. This is a site that would require, according to the experts, tactical nukes. And guess who's not going to be opposed to that idea? Benjamin Netanyahu, who, by the way, visited Dimona. Yes, that Dimona, Israel's secret nuclear facility, just yesterday. Netanyahu publicly threatened to use nuclear weapons against Iran, not explicitly, but implicitly, while speaking in Dimona, near Israel's main nuclear research facility, where the country maintains an undeclared nuclear weapons program. Netanyahu made it clear that this will, quote, be a very different event and much more powerful event. We are prepared for any scenario with Iran. So there you have it. If anyone is open, supportive, and gung-ho for the idea of dropping nuclear bombs on Pickaxe Mountain, it would be Netanyahu. And it seems as though he is, despite Lindsey Graham being gone, he's got someone whispering in Trump's ear about Pickaxe Mountain. And this would be a very, very, very stupid, foolish, naive, dangerous, damaging, depraved, all the words you can think of to say this is a bad, stupid idea. This would be a horrible, horrific escalation from the Trump administration. But given all the information I just gave you, do you think it's out of the possibility? Do you think it's like out of the realm of possibility? Do you understand why I'm looking at this and I'm saying how insane is it that there are still people saying, oh, let's go to Islamabad and negotiate. Let's go to Muscat and negotiate. We can hammer this stuff out. No, we're long past that. Every red line has been violated. Even the silly red lines of the MOU, like no new sanctions on Iran, like they couldn't even uphold that. No new threats against Iran. They couldn't even uphold that, right? No return to war. No threatening of return to war. They couldn't even uphold the most basic of red lines in the memorandum of understanding. This is long dead and over. There's no coming back from this whatsoever. It's time to move on, defend yourselves, and prepare for the worst case scenario because we are dealing with actual demons. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.
About ground troops in Iran is, well, you go ahead and listen. This is B1.
You posted today on True Social comments that you made back in 1988 about Karg Island. And at the time you said, one bullet shot at one of our men or ships, and I'd do a number on Karg Island, I'd go in and take it.
Yeah.
Do you still intend to take Karg Island?
So I can't say that to you because if I did, it would be foolish, right? But it'd be nice to make a little headlines, but it would be foolish. But I'll tell you about Karg Island. So we've already...
Are you ruling out a ground campaign in a limited capacity?
I don't want to say that either, but I would say no if I thought it was appropriate. I'd say sometimes you need a ground campaign, but we have other people that will do the ground campaign for us. But we already hit Karg Island, as you know, twice, even 3 times. I said, hit everything but the oil. Just leave that little area from 25 yards out. Leave that little area. Don't touch the oil. Because I don't want that in terms of the world economy. It's a chunk of the world economy. So we haven't hit that. At some point we could, but I think it's unlikely. As far as taking it is concerned, if we degrade them far enough and deep enough back,
All right, so we had hoped that we had somehow escaped the escalation trap into the warm embrace of the memorandum of understanding reached between the United States and Iran. Unfortunately, seems like that trap is cinched just as tightly around our ankles. We can put up B2 here, Professor Robert Pape's piece yesterday over at his Substack, The Escalation Trap. The escalation trap has entered a new phase. Joining us to discuss kind of what that new phase is University of Chicago Professor Robert Pape. Professor, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you got it. So, hoping that we had moved on, not quite. What was it in your assessment that kind of pulled us back in?
Yes, well, thank you for talking about this. This is really quite a tragic moment. We're entering some of the most dangerous weeks of this war, quite likely. And people are thinking, well, this is just a return to, say, March or early April. It could be much worse than that. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but where we are at is very predictable. So as you'll recall, there have been 3 core stages of the escalation trap. Stage 1 is where you have regime change bombing that kills leaders, but leaves America weaker, because you get a stage 2, which is, although we kill the leaders and hit targets, Iran lashes back in a horizontal escalation campaign and takes Hormuz, and now controls 20% of the world's energy. And the we will take every effort. We tried punishment campaign for 6 weeks, air power, that failed. We tried 2-month blockade, that failed. And we are still where we are with stage 3, which is the ground power dilemma. So if you go to February 25th on the escalation trap, 3 days before the bombing, you'll see all these stages laid out before the war, and we would get to the ground power dilemma, and that's where we are today. Now, what is that dilemma? Either we physically take Hormuz back, and you're seeing President Trump repositioning forces to do that, and we can talk about the details, including the ground operations, or we don't, and you get what I call stage 4, which is Iran becomes the 4th center of world power over the next year or so. It continues to control Hormuz and reap all the economic benefits from that. It spreads its sphere of influence here to basically go from Lebanon to the Red Sea to the Gulf, and you see they're basically beginning to do that. And then in about 18 months, they develop nuclear weapons. So this is the actual trajectory of what it means to simply not take Hormuz back, to walk away. And people keep thinking there's some third option. There's not a third option. And we've tried every possible third option. Now, there's something very specific, I think, just to drill into what happened in the last few weeks, that I think can help make some sense here for your listeners, because I understand the whipsaw here, because I face it every day with my Substack. It's now almost 70,000. We got a lot of people emailing me and telling me all kinds of things. So I definitely feel this. But what I just want to sort of explain here is, well, what happened with the MOU? And you've had me on. I'm not surprised this thing fell apart. But what exactly happened here with President Trump? Why didn't he just keep going forward? Well, there's really 2 reasons here that's very important to understand. Reason number 1 is that the reason Trump said he wanted to do the MOU was to avoid the oil inventories running down. You recall, he said, we're going to run out of oil in 4 weeks, which means he would become Herbert Hoover. And then everybody said, well, okay, so that means he can't avoid that. Well, no, the problem is, if you look at the oil inventory curves, which I'm sure President Trump is getting, we're still running down. We're basically still on the Titanic, heading to the iceberg. We haven't diverted from the iceberg. We're going to hit that iceberg somewhere around the middle of August. We don't know the exact days here. That's what all these oil experts are debating. Is it August 7th, August 15th, September 1? But this is not a problem. It's we're going to hit this iceberg. And so President Trump, the MOU failed from his perspective. J.D. Vance said the reason Trump told us to do this was to fill the oil coffers. This did not work. He still at risk of becoming Herbert Hoover. So this is issue number one. He's desperate. He's not using these options because they're going to win in a certainty. He's desperate because he sees certain becoming Herbert Hoover. And he's being very desperate, trying anything to avoid it. There's a second reason, which is the MAGA opinion polls. The MAGA opinion polls are very strongly in favor of a regime change in Iran, and President Trump needs MAGA to turn out. He doesn't need Democrats to turn out. They're not going to vote for him. He doesn't need even the independents. What he needs is MAGA in these midterms to turn out. That's what midterms are always about. It's the base. Well, this is, he's also feeding a big part of his base. There's only a small part of his base that's a Tucker Carlson part of his base. So people, I think, have just been misreading the midterm incentives here for Trump. And what you see is he is the ship on the captain of the Titanic. He's heading us here, and it's because he's desperate to find a way to avoid hitting the iceberg, even if that means this super highly risky set of options, which, by the way, I am not in favor of. I want to be very, very clear. I am not supporting this idea. I believe all the bad things that everybody is saying. My job is to be, though, put my policy, my preference hat aside and say, setting that aside, where are we actually heading? That's why the escalation trap has been on the money month after month after month after month after month. We're in five months now of this being on the money, and your listeners will know. You guys push back at me all the time, right?
Right.
And I don't want this to be the case. I'm just following 20 years of modeling where this heads and understanding the real dilemmas that are at work. Even as we're heading to a really potentially costly future here.
Well, the part I'm trying to figure out is why Trump forgot about the physical limitations that he was so clear about at the beginning of the MOU. When he was explaining to people publicly why he agreed to the terms of the truce, he, as you said, he said multiple times, if I didn't, it was going to be bedlam, I think was the word he used. And multiple times in this long interview that not long press conference he held, he talked about Herbert Hoover. You know, he has basically two South Stars, I guess you could call them, and that's Jimmy Carter and that's Herbert Hoover. And to him, Carter involves Iran too. That he believes that the Iranian hostage rescue attempt that went south is what really cratered his that combined, interestingly, with the oil embargo that led to gas lines and high gas prices. That cratered his presidency. And then Herbert Hoover, of course, nobody needs to be reminded what happened to Herbert Hoover. So that's his big concern. And he was saying that because inventories are low, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is low, like he needed to get, he needed to reach a deal, or else he was going to become Herbert Hoover. But nothing has changed. Like, we've added
that's the problem here. Nothing has changed. The oil inventories with the MOU are still going down, right, which means the MOU is Trump's roadmap to becoming Herbert Hoover.
Right.
That's what he sees. Now, you can disagree with him, but see, this is what the media is not quite getting. Your question is a very understandable one, and I understand why you're asking. But it's hard to listen to what I'm saying because it's so, we don't want this to happen. But here's the problem. The problem from Trump's perspective is the MOU was supposed to be his off-ramp to avoid becoming Herbert Hoover. But the MOU has turned out to still run the oil inventories to ground. If you look at the ships passing the Strait of Hormuz, they're still virtually, they're almost zero. They're not quite zero. We got a little bit of oil out, but it's because Iran is shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. It's not just Trump shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. Iran decided to be very aggressive in enforcing the MOU and shut down the Strait of Hormuz. It was Iran who initiated the shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz, not President Trump. And so why is that? It's because Iran wants revenge. Iran has moved from survival to ambition to revenge. And that's what you see with those tens of millions pouring out, and these are all connected. These are not separate issues. Iran is shutting down the Strait of Hormuz here because Trump won't honor the MOU. And Trump can't honor the MOU without the big loss on his record. So the bottom line is that what's happening is the MOU is become simply a roadmap to Trump hitting the iceberg anyway. And what he's trying to do now is use military force to see if he can minimize how long the oil, the damage is to the world's economy. I don't think he's going to succeed. I think the risks are too great. But this is why he's doing this. And I think if we don't take this seriously, we can't really try to convince him to do something else. So if we really just keep dismissing why he's doing it, even though he's telling us so directly, then you're never going to persuade the decision makers. And I know because I've advised every West Wing, including the first Trump White House, from 2001 to 24, chiefs of staff of the Air Force. You're not going to convince them by telling them they're stupid, their ideas are bad. You've got to understand where they're coming from. And if you don't, then the only thing you can do is wait to vote them out of office in 2028. But by 2028, look at all the damage that's going to happen. So this is really the problem that we face. We're having a hard time seeing it from Trump's perspective because the oil inventories, if you just show the chart, they're still going down. That's what he said the problem was, and the MOU didn't fix the problem.
Well, so I'll put the pushback I would give on that would be, and we can put this chart up in post. Right. The MOU is signed June 17th, and I think the Titanic and the iceberg analogy is actually useful. If Trump thought that he was driving like an F1 car, and that Hormuz traffic was going to do some hairpin turn and go from zero to pre-MOU, then whether or not those people that you're advising want to be called idiots or not, that's an idiotic thing to think. Like it's going to take some time to get it back up, and you do actually see the traffic coming through the Strait of Hormuz, significantly expanding, elevating. Like you're seeing more and more ships go through. Now, about a week ago, when the shooting really kicked back off, then you see it collapsing again. And so so for Trump, it's like, okay, yeah, you didn't immediately refill all your inventories in strategic petroleum reserve stockpile, but the ships were coming through. So how is stopping it going to helping him?
That's right. So there was another choice that Trump could have made. And apparently he signed some of the orders to do this, which is when he signed the MOU, he could have withdrawn all 50,000 U.S. troops from the region. He could have withdrawn all 22 carriers and 20 destroyers and cruisers from the region. And Iran would have been probably quite happy with that and not shot at ships. So that was the real choice that he had in front of him.
Like the problem was they tried to go through the Omani side with their
well that's what I'm trying to say, sir, is that the real fork in the road happened when he signed the MOU. When he signed the MOU, he had a choice. Is he going to let Iran become the fourth center of world power, fully control the Strait of Hormuz for real, or not?
Right.
And what it would mean to allow the Iran to fully do the MOU, because remember, the MOU is all concessions to Iran. What it would mean is withdraw 50,000 combat forces from the region, all our bases in Bahrain, etc. That's what Iran wants. And also all of the 20 ships. And notice that was his real choice. And apparently he even signed an order to start to do some of that. But then he decided he couldn't accept that was too big of a loss because then his MAGA base would not turn out in the midterms. And that's the problem. There's no third way. There's no compromise where we share the Strait of Hormuz. People keep thinking this is a business deal and we're just going to meet in the middle, triangulate in the middle. This is great power politics. And President Trump had a choice. You either let Iran get on the trajectory, control Hormuz 100%, become the fourth center of world power, or you physically take it back. There's no other way around it. And in order to avoid where we are, sir, what you would need to do is physically withdraw all of the forces here. And some people were arguing for that. Joe Kent was arguing for that effectively. Ron Paul was arguing for that effectively. So there were voices arguing if we marched in, we could march out. And President Trump just wouldn't go that far because he'd lose MAGA. And he needs MAGA. So this is the problem. The reason, I think the reason people are having a hard time seeing it is most of the media is not really very much into MAGA. They haven't gone to Trump. I've been to Trump rallies because that's part of my book, Our Own Worst Enemies. This is my field research. I've been to Butler's all weekend with these folks. These folks they're loyal to Trump only if he is a winner.
Right.
This is another way to think about it is they have faith in Trump, not because he's a good man. Okay. It's because he's a winner. And once he lets Iran become the fourth center of world power and on the road to getting nuclear weapons for real, and where's the actual option anybody's come up with to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons? All of the people from the JCPO explain Trump's getting nowhere with stopping Iran getting nuclear weapons. So everybody agrees fundamentally that the only way to stop this is to let Iran keep Hormuz and keep its nuclear threshold, or if not over the threshold status. And that's the problem for Trump. He can't own that L and keep MAGA for the midterms.
On this trajectory, my sense is that he's going to be Hoover and lose Hormuz.
Yeah,
you agree?
That's what happens. That's how Lyndon Johnson. So what he's doing is he's trying to avoid becoming Herbert Hoover, and what he'll likely become is Lyndon Johnson. And there's no way for him to become Ronald Reagan. He's looking for a way for him to become Ronald Reagan, pull a rabbit out of the hat. This is going to somehow, like with the air traffic control strike, with Ronald Reagan, suddenly everybody will be, oh my God, it was the most brilliant thing. But the reason this happens, and I study preventive wars for a living for 30 years, so I'm not just generally studying international relations. Preventive wars happen because the attackers see certain loss, and then they take highly risky actions to avoid a certain loss. So think of it as they see 100% loss, and now they take a risk it's only 80%. And that's what we're seeing here in all the commentary. Everybody's saying this is almost surely going to fail. Well, for President Trump, that's right. But to not do it is an even worse outcome for him and his presidency. If the world suffers, that's secondary for Trump.
Yeah, well, we're all screwed. Professor Pape, thanks as always for the brutal.
I wish I had better news.
Yeah. Maybe next week.
Hey, if you
in the world and deepened and widened the understanding of ordinary people of military, political affairs immeasurably. He's a superstar, in other words, former Marine Corps intelligence officer and regular friend of the mother of all talk shows, joins us now. Scott, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the multiple war fronts, let me ask you about Trump. I know we've spoken about this before, but it does seem now to me, as someone who pores over every word he says and writes, that this is becoming really acute now. He's posting apropos nothing pictures of him with the European leaders, with Greenland in the American Stars and Stripes, with Ukraine in the American Stars and Stripes. He's openly ruminating about setting ISIS and Al-Qaeda against the Lebanese resistance organizations. He is openly talking about running the Persian Gulf and charging people through the nose for the privilege of his Genovese-style protection. In other words, he's acting like he rules the world. Now, you've often called him a narcissist, and frankly, that's the least now of what he is. But it's becoming almost criminal narcissism. It's becoming maybe actionable under the 25th Amendment if there was any sanity left in the political system in the United States. Do you agree?
I agree 110%. I mean, it's an embarrassment. As you rightly pointed out, I've said that he suffers from a narcissistic personality disorder of the most malignant nature, that he is a sociopath, a threat to society, and that he, has created a government that no longer functions in the manner of being the chief executive of a concept premised on the notion of separate but equal branches of government, bounded together by a constitution that unites the people and the government into a constitutional republic. We function as a cult of personality of the most extreme nature. And literally, there's nobody willing to say the emperor has no clothes. Everybody's sitting there, praising this fat, obese, naked man as if he's dressed in the finest, Polo or Gucci. It's an embarrassment, but it's more than an embarrassment. It's a sign of the advanced stage of decay of the American Republic that I loved and continue to love. But the Republic that I love no longer exists. We don't have a nation of ideas premised on the notion that we could be a more perfect union if we just keep working toward, goals and objectives that we all share. The beauty of the United States was that it was always a nation that had the potential to be better, because that's the notion that we were premised on, to forming a more perfect union. We, the people of the United States of America. That means that we collectively are responsible for the government we're about to create through the Constitution for the purpose of forming a more perfect union. We were a work in progress, and we've always been a work in progress. And that's what I loved about us, is that for all of our faults, and there were many, we were, when we were constituted under the Constitution, slavery was considered to be A-OK. There are many flaws in our country, and these flaws have manifested themselves in many ways throughout the 250 years of our the conceptualization through the Declaration of Independence. But today we aren't a nation of ideas anymore. We're a nation that has allowed this brain dead thug to dictate who we are and what we are through social media posts. Again, the insulting nature of government run by social media. The chief executive is supposed to preside over a government bound by the Constitution, agencies and departments. He's supposed to articulate vision that is then passed down to the people who serve him in his cabinet. And these people are supposed to then go down to their subordinates and through an interagency process, reach consensus on how best to, bring this vision to fruition. It's a process of government, of governance. And it's worked, for better or for worse, for the duration of this country. We don't have this today. We don't have that system. There is no interagency process. We have a nation of bureaucrats and technocrats who wake up every morning looking at their computer or their phone for a social media posting that's going to give them direction. We're a nation that has allowed itself to devolve into continuous chaos, and the people that we elect to govern us, their job is now to control chaos, to manage chaos. That's no way to do business. And sadly, that's where we are today. And it's because of Donald Trump. He is the greatest single threat to the constitutional republic and the American people that has ever existed.
Caligula famously appointed his own horse as a proconsul of Rome. I suppose Trump's Caligula's horses, for there are more than one, But they must include this joker who's in power in Damascus that Trump openly boasts that he imposed on the people of Syria, former deputy leader of ISIS, former deputy leader of Al-Qaeda, Zelensky, of course, for a time, Netanyahu, although who's the horse, who's the jockey and who's the mount, might be problematic. The elevation of Lindsey Graham to some paragon of virtue in red panties. The elevation of warlords. He's now talking about the Kurds. He's got an army, he says, that's going to make a ground invasion of Iran. It's the Kurds that he has armed, setting them up, of course, for a bloodbath. And what would happen if they succeeded? What would happen to Iran if Kurds invading from Iraq became the ruling power? The way he treated the prime minister of Iraq in the Oval Office, humiliating him. The man went along with it, I should say, and I'm sure he'll pay a political price for that. But he even asked the prime minister of Iraq if he, Trump, had done him a favor by assassinating General Soleimani, even though one of the most important figures in Iraq was killed alongside Soleimani. These Caligula's horses, there's a whole parade of them. And it's this megalomania, really, that Trump is displaying right now, which is the most disturbing thing to me.
Well, I share your concern, and I could echo everything you just said. I won't, but now we have to reflect on the method behind the madness here. Because we're seeing a pattern emerge. George, everything that you just articulated, a rational human being would say, given an option, given a range of options, the worst possible choice would be the one that President Trump has made repeatedly. He has never made a good choice. He's made a bad choice every single time. We can talk about, for instance, his decision to authorize Saudi Arabia to bomb Yemen. Literally, this is the worst choice imaginable, because now it has opened up the reality of a resumption of Yemeni-Saudi conflict that will spill over into the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, causing the closure of this strait at a time when Saudi Arabia has redirected 70% of its oil production through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Remember, this is a president who said he had to sign the MOU because he was running out of oil. He had no choice but to do this, acknowledging defeat, in effect. We have J.D. Vance acknowledging that the MOU is always a charade, simply to buy time to get more oil. So we're getting a clue as to what's going on with this president. He is creating chaos deliberately. He is literally going to, because the reality is the United States today, as you rightly pointed out, we want to be the global hegemon, but we're incapable of being the global hegemon. We lack the resources to actually govern and rule and direct using normative standards, where the person calling the shots is the person who can best influence the situation. The United States has lost the ability to directly influence rational, unfolding situations. What we can do and what we are doing is managing chaos. And so Donald Trump's job right now is to engender as much chaos in the world. Everything he talked about, there's no chance. You know this, George. There's a snowball's chance in hell of the Kurds putting together a force capable of invading Iran, let alone overthrowing the regime. What will happen, though, is that by attempting to do so, articulating this, there will be further chaos, not just with Iran, but in Iraq, spilling over into Syria, spilling over into Turkey. And this is what Donald Trump wants. He cannot, on his own volition, with the resources available to him, dictate outcomes. What he can do is mandate chaos and then seek to control chaos. It's much easier to control chaos than it is to impose order. And this is what this narcissistic madman has done, because the only way he can continue to be a force of relevance in the world is to make the world dysfunctional so that, he can then be seen as pulling strings that don't matter. Who cares if he says that Jolani is a tough guy, a good guy? We know who Jolani is. The point is, Donald Trump has become a literal joke, because the world, the serious world out there, knows that every time he says something, the reality is the exact opposite. Nobody respects this man anymore. Nobody respects this man anymore. But they need this man because the United States is the only nation in the Western world capable of controlling the chaos that we created. But look at Russia, look at Iran. They despise us openly. They recognize that we cannot be dealt with rationally. Russia has declared that Donald Trump is emotionally unstable. Emotionally unstable. That means that they can't predict anything he's going to do. Is this something the average American should be proud of? And the answer is hell no.
Hell no, and a very dangerous state of affairs. Let's run through the wars then, Scott. What's happening right now in and over Iran? And what do you think is going to happen next?
Well, again, I just ask people to reflect on the fact that this isn't the first rodeo. We started a war back in February 28th that ended, I believe, on April 8th. It was 39 days of conflict that we lost, we being the United States. And we lost it for a number of reasons. One, we weren't able to impose our will on Iran. We sought to collapse the regime by murdering their supreme leader. This failed. We sought to eradicate their ability to launch ballistic missiles through direct to kinetic intervention. This failed. We sought to control the flow of oil by seizing control of the Strait of Hormuz. This failed. Every military objective, every political objective failed. And ultimately, we were compelled to seek a ceasefire because we ran out of ammunition. I just want to remind people that the United States of America, the greatest military power on the planet that spends $1 trillion a year, ran out of ammunition. We ran out of the ability to carry out long-range strike, and we ran out of the ability to do precision intercept. So we had to call a pause. Now, we've taken the time to not just rebuild our stocks of oil, but to also strip bare our defenses elsewhere and the defenses of our allies to re-up the arsenal that we're using against Iran. But the reality is we haven't reconstituted our strength. Donald Trump speaks of 3 weeks of military action. This, I believe, is the totality of our capacity to sustain military action against Iran. The first week is ongoing, haphazard strikes to make a point, sort of a shock and awe. It's going to fail. Next week, he's going to escalate, according to him, to take out energy production facilities, the power plants, the bridges, etc. This will fail. And then the third and last week is, of course, to hit energy production facilities. But, these swords that he's wielding are double-edged swords. The moment we see right now, Iran is delivering more harm to American military assets and regional allies than we are inflicting on Iran. Their ballistic missiles are doing more harm to us than we're inflicting on them. Now, this is somewhat speculative, but I can say this with the confidence of knowing that 39 days of aerial bombardment of Iran didn't accomplish anything meaningful. Iran has fully recovered, and now we're coming in and we're trying to repeat the same scenario over again. Einstein said the definition of insanity is seeking to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We're insane trying to do this. Now we're going to move to energy production, meaning the power plants. Does Donald Trump not understand that Iran will respond by taking out the power plants of our regional allies? What happens right now, the temperatures are through the roof in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, in Kuwait City, and Manama, and elsewhere. What happens when they lose the ability to produce the power that gives them the air conditioning? What happens if they take out desalination plants? You've basically made these major cities unlivable. And that's just the because if we then escalate to take out Iranian power production, oil and gas production, Iran will respond by totally decapitating the energy production capacity of the Gulf Arab states. And people need to understand that this is an extraordinarily dangerous thing. The world needs the energy coming out of the Middle East. It's 25% of the world's energy. Now, people say, well, there's 75% out there, but the world doesn't work in terms of 75%. The world functions as a 100% calculation. And if you start disrupting oil, it doesn't just mean that higher gases. It's not just about gasoline and diesel. This is about producing fertilizer that's used to feed the world. The sulfur that comes from, sour oil, the ammonia that comes from the processing of oil. These are used to create fertilizers that much of the developing world must have to make crops viable. We've already disrupted. There's going to be a global impact that will affect millions of people because of Donald Trump's decisions. And now he's getting ready to shut everything down again. This will affect hundreds of millions of people. And we're talking about the potential of tens of millions of deaths. And if we go through another cycle, it becomes literally exponential, meaning that, the damage done, we haven't recovered, and the damage, it takes less to do more damage going down. There is the chance, if we get a total disruption of Middle East energy for a period of time that falls into the fall of this year, that tens of billions of people are going to die of starvation, hunger, etc., because there will be no food for them. This is what Donald Trump is doing. This is the insanity of the moment that people need to pick up on. And the world needs to start shouting, because if Europe's sitting there being deaf, dumb, and blind to the crimes being committed by the United States, what happens, George, when Africa goes under? When the Sahel, when West Africa loses the capacity to produce food, and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people start a compelled migration because they have no choice. They're dying. They're starving. There's no food. They will migrate across. They will lose tens of millions in the deserts of the Sahara, but they will arrive at the shores of the Maghreb, of North Africa, and they will surge into Europe, and Europe has no solution for them. Europe will literally be overrun by these desperate refugees that will suck Europe dry. That's the future of Europe, literally the future of Europe, because of Donald Trump. And what happens in the Middle East? Where do the Iranians go when they lose the capacity to produce the food? They can run to Turkmenistan, Pakistan, but Pakistan's got problems. Turkmenistan lacks the capacity. They will move through Turkey into Europe, and Turkey will be giving them the sign, keep going, keep going, keep going. Europe will be overrun. This is the future of Europe because of the policies of Donald Trump. It's the future of humanity because we have the potential of losing, billions of people. I said tens of billions. I meant tens of millions because there's only 8 billion people in the world today. But the point is, we have the potential of losing billions of people because of this catastrophe that's about to be, and there's no quick recovery. Once this process begins, once the infrastructure of life support deteriorates, it isn't readily constituted. The world will be losing so much of its energy and resources responding to these global catastrophes that they won't be able to put the effort into reconstitution. We're condemning humanity to an absolute decade or more of catastrophe.
And not a single European leader has spoken in the way you just have of the centrality of Europe to all of this. Deaf, dumb, and blind, as you put it, is their attitude. The Europeans, on the other hand, are redoubling their efforts to create more war in the Ukraine. The coalition of the willing, a group of non-entities, deeply unpopular in their own countries where they're not viscerally hated. In the case of Starmer, in the case of Merz, case of Macron, viscerally hated by their own population. But the one thing they can come together and do is to keep building up the ante in the war against Russia. And Trump seems to have entirely lost his mojo on trying to bring that war to a close. The one he promised 57 times in public during the election that he would stop and finish within 24 hours. 57 times he said that. And he seems to have completely lost his will, if that will ever existed, to bring about an end to the war in Ukraine.
Look, what I think is happening here is that Donald Trump has finally come to the realization that there is no ability to compel Vladimir Putin and Russia to accept conflict terminations on the terms dictated by Europe and Ukraine, and indirectly by the United States, that this is a false hope. And I believe that Donald Trump has come to recognize that from his perspective, the problem is Vladimir Putin. And therefore, Donald Trump is seeking to remove Vladimir Putin from power. Now, any rational person who has been to Russia, I just came back from Russia, because you met with me there, we would know that this is absurd thinking, that the concept of Vladimir Putin being unpopular, the concept of Vladimir Putin being vulnerable to a military coup or some sort of a Moscow Maidan moment where the citizens of Moscow are going to flood into the central square demanding that Vladimir Putin step down. But this is the last gasp hope of Europe and Ukraine, and now the United States. Donald Trump is desperate for a policy solution, and he has been convinced by people that while you can't have Ukraine win this war, what you can do is exhaust Russia, that you can create the conditions inside Russia conducive to societal collapse. And this is the fantasy of people that have been around for some time. And I believe Donald Trump has now embraced this fantasy. And the Russians have to wake up and understand this. There is no spirit of anchorage. Sergei Lavrov has correctly articulated the United States is agreement incapable. But the reality is that Donald Trump is an enemy of Russia. There is no potential friction. But now we come into a concept that I'm developing. I call it hybrid diplomacy. In normal diplomatic interaction, you would shut the door. You would say, we can't deal with this, because diplomacy is about, a process that's based upon tact and certain respect for, mutual beneficial stuff. Of course, you negotiate to get the best relationship for you, but there has to be a process where both parties have a buy-in. Today, with the United States, there's only one buy-in, Donald Trump's buy-in today. But remember, the Russians said that he is emotionally unstable. And so now the Russians will simply wait, just like the Iranians will, or one day they'll wake up and Donald Trump will send out a social media post, just the opposite. We can sit here and talk about what Donald Trump said today. But George, that in a week, he could say the exact opposite. And this is what the Russians are waiting for. Not that they're going to believe what he says then, but that will create a window of opportunity for them to, complicate the picture for Donald Trump, inject new ideas, maybe get Kirill Dmitriev to sit down with Witkoff and Kushner and talk about tunnel diplomacy. And suddenly Donald Trump will be speaking about Russian rare earth minerals and the need to invest in Russia. And it buys a window of time until the next time Donald Trump wakes up and decides that Vladimir Zelensky is the epitome of democracy, the Ukrainian version of George Washington that must be supported until death do us part. And it's this kind of fluctuation. Anatoly Antonov, the former Russian ambassador, when I asked him about the 2024 election, I said, "Who do you want to win?" He said, "We're not going to put a name to it. We want the candidate that gives us the greatest predictability," meaning that we want somebody who is predictable. The outcomes are predictable. We can build policy based upon predictability. Instability, it's impossible to formulate effective policies. And that's where the Russians are right now. They're a hostage to the psychological vacillations of this deranged being in the White House. And they, like everybody in the American government, wake up scrolling social media to see what the hell the lunatic in the White House has posted today. And then they have to create policy to respond to that.
And believe it or not, I'm in China. Believe it or not, these are not the only wars they're planning. I was just watching General Kellogg talk about what a great investment the war in Ukraine is, because it takes one party off the table, allowing us to concentrate on China. And the Chinese are being set up, I'm convinced, in the Philippines, not Taiwan. The Philippines is being constructed, the South China Sea, over unpronounceable islands unknown to man. outside of the area. They are creating a casus belli in the Philippines as the new Ukraine, as the Ukraine for China. I mean, talk about chaos. They can't even beat Iran, but they plan to have a war with China. What madness is this?
It is madness. But let's reflect. You have a poll question, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Should we be concerned about the rearmament of Germany? Well, here you just postulated the question, should we be concerned about a Philippine-U.S. military relationship as opposed to threat to China? But before we answer that, we have to reflect on a previous military arrangement, the tripartite arrangement between the United States, South Korea, and Japan, that have recently come together and said, we are three solid aligned members with joint singular policy to oppose North Korea and North Korea's nuclear threat. In order to do that, the United States has, of course, flooded air defense systems into South Korea and Japan. And we told the Japanese that you can get the Tomahawk missile, so you have a 400 missile counterstrike capacity. We told the South Koreans that you can sit in on our nuclear war planning, that everything's kosher. And yet, because of the war in Iran, we had to go in and strip bare, without even consulting them, the totality of their air defense. And we told the Japanese to pound sand on Tomahawk missiles. So now you're the Philippines government, and you're saying, America's coming, promise us rainbows and unicorns, and it's going to be wonderful. The United States can't deliver on anything. What weapons are we going to send to the Philippines? We have sent everything to Iran, and in 3 weeks, we will run out of ammunition. There is no capacity. So now the Chinese, who aren't stupid, are looking at this saying, we hear bad rhetoric, but the reality is the United States has zero capacity to act on this, just like we hear out of Germany how they're going to rearm. I mean, hell, we just had a former German defense minister tell the Russians, not only are you going to lose Crimea, but you're going to lose Kaliningrad. Germany wants Kaliningrad back, they said. And they're talking about tripling the size of the German army and all this stuff. But the fact is, Germany has zero capacity to do any of this. There is no military capability in Germany to do anything they talked about. They lack the capacity, the industrial capacity. 60% of the manpower in Germany says we will not fight in a war, even if we're invaded, which means that Merz would have to do conscription. If you want to watch the German government collapse quicker than a house of cards in a tornado, try to do conscription right now as justification for taking Kaliningrad back from the Russians. It won't fly. There's zero chance that Germany will rearm, just like there's zero chance the United States will have a meaningful military relationship with the Philippines.
And lastly, believe it or not, the Board of Peace hasn't met, has become bored of peace. Nobody knows where the money went. The Israelis are about to pack the remaining 2 million or so Palestinians in Gaza into what Haaretz described as the most humane concentration camps the world has ever seen. I don't know if they meant it ironically or they were being serious, but that was what the paper of record in Israel brought us, with a picture of these hutches, rabbit hutches or hen houses that they were going to somehow pack millions of Palestinians into prior to the world accepting them as refugees. Netanyahu looks to be in deep trouble in the coming Israeli elections in October, I think. Ben Gvir is currently ahead in the opinion polls. The war is still raging in Lebanon, in Syria, the Middle East tract, never mind the Persian Gulf, never mind Central and Eastern Europe, never mind the South China Sea. The good old Middle East, the Levant, is still a powder keg waiting to explode, isn't it?
100%, and it's just going to get worse for the poor Israelis. We go back to Donald Trump and his 3-week plan. And what happens at the end of the third week when we've launched everything, we have nothing left, we've blown up energy production, energy power generation, and the Iranians have responded in the Persian Gulfs in chaos. Does the United States just walk away? No, we activate phase 4, where we give Israel the green light to resume operations against Iran. And Iran will, inflict horrific harm on Israel. This is the chaos that Donald Trump is seeking to generate. I don't know where Israel thinks they're going, but I do know this. If you build a concentration camp and you put rabbit hutches in there, you might as well name it Auschwitz, Dachau, and any of the other names of the death camps, because that's what it's become. And for Israel to go down this path means that they've totally lost the script. Now, we know, you and I have known they've lost the script a long time ago, but to go down this path, it makes it impossible for anybody to articulate anything rational that Israel has a legitimate right to exist. I believe that Israel is working itself into non-existence. I don't know the methodology of their death, but I know that Israel as a nation state will die, and will die soon, because of people like Ben Gvir, because of the horrific governance policies of Benjamin Netanyahu, and because of the indifference of Donald Trump. Again, for somebody who's supposed to be, under the sway of Israel, he's doing more to ensure the destruction of Israel as a nation state than any other man alive, because Israel is literally on a highway to hell. It will not end well for Israel. And the one man that could stop Israel on this path, Donald Trump, refuses to do so. Instead, he enables these genocidal policies. George, I just want your listeners to close their eyes and just think of the horrific photographs in World War II, where the surviving slaves of the German concentration system were found by American soldiers and Russian soldiers in their beds, unable to move. They're starved, cadaver-like corpses. This is what Israel is proposing for 2 million Palestinians, and the world is silent about this.
Silent, yeah. Might a goal of this chaos that you described so brilliantly be the suspension of democratic life in the United States? Might it, for example, be some kind of prelude to the midterms being postponed, even cancelled? Democracy itself being a kind of martial law being in place in the U.S.?
Under normal circumstances, I would say no, because I still believe that there's a sufficient number of Americans who take the oath, uphold and defend the Constitution, to believe that document is viable. And therefore, if the president gave unlawful orders regarding manipulation of an election and suppression of vote, that sufficient people, especially at the governor level at the states, would say no. But now we come to the chaos theory that you injected. There is going to be global calamity on a scale, but there's the potential of global calamity that will resonate into the United States, creating the potential of a state of emergency where, traditional democratic norms and values will be suspended. And this is a potential. I've been wondering why Donald Trump is behaving in such a normal, insane fashion. Meaning we know he's insane, but there's not the panic of Adolf Hitler. One would be expecting, kind of facing what you're facing, that this would be Adolf Hitler in the bunker as Berlin, losing his cool and sweating and swearing and eventually blowing his brains out. But no, Donald Trump seems to be pleased about what's happening, because I think he understands that the only path to his political survival, and therefore the survival of the Trump legacy, which he cares about more than anything, more than America, is to ensure victory in November, and that can only be assured through the suspension of democratic norms and values, and that this chaos that he's engendering, as I said, every decision he makes when given a range of options would be the worst possible decision, unless your goal is absolute collapse of societal norms, the engendering of chaos globally, so that Donald Trump alone can be the manager of the chaos. And he manages it in a way that creates the conditions for his continued political viability. Sadly, I'm moving in that direction in terms of my analysis.
Iran has once again showcased its growing naval ambitions. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC Navy, has unveiled its new high-speed assault vessel known as the 27 Rajab speedboat during a massive public rally at Tehran's Ankalab Square. The unveiling was part of the 90th consecutive night of public gatherings and comes amid heightened tensions across the Gulf. The vessel was first introduced by Iranian state media in late May, but fresh footage has now resurfaced, showing the boat being transported through cheering crowds as supporters waved flags and flares lit up the night sky. According to Iranian officials, the 27 Rajab features a trimaran, or three-hull design. Tehran says this configuration improves stability, maneuverability, and speed even in rough sea conditions. Iran also claims the vessel is capable of launching 2 sea-based cruise missiles with a reported range of up to 700 kilometers. Officials say it can remain combat-ready in waves as high as 3 meters, making it suitable for operations in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC says the new assault boat is designed for rapid response missions, coastal defense, and asymmetric naval warfare. It forms part of Iran's long-standing strategy of deploying fast, missile-armed boats in large numbers to challenge larger naval forces operating in the region. Military analysts note that the trimaran design could provide improved stability compared with traditional fast attack craft. However, many of the vessel's advertised capabilities, including its reported missile range and operational performance, have not been independently verified. Iran has not released detailed information about the boat's propulsion system, top speed, radar suite, or the exact type of cruise missiles it carries. The unveiling comes at a time of continued military tensions between Iran, the United States, and regional allies, with the Strait of Hormuz remaining one of the world's most strategically important waterways. While Tehran presents the new vessel as a major boost to its naval deterrence, defense experts say its true capabilities will only become clear through future testing and operational deployment. For now, the 27 Rajab stands as the latest addition to Iran's expanding fleet of fast attack craft, highlighting the country's continued focus on strengthening its maritime strike capabilities.
The Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed up until the end of America's mischief. They need to behave. The enemy should know that now that its pirates have blocked the export route of oil and gas to the world from the Indian Ocean, endangering the interests of American economic rivals, it should expect other export routes supplying the US and allied interests to be blocked. So that is an outright confirmation almost that Bab el-Mandeb is going to be shut. And there's going to be an economic disaster. Why? Because a pedophile president of the United States of America who's blackmailed by the Zionist child-murdering Netanyahu and their allies, their corrupt child-killing pedophile elite allies who run the world, are concerned and only wanting to protect this genocidal colony of Israel and have endless wars to support the military-industrial complex so they can profiteer from it. They don't give a damn about people, and if this destroys the economy of people and people have to pay more for fuel or energy or food or whatever it is, so long as the satanic genocidal death cult of Israel is fine and it's protected. Oil and gas exports from the region are either for everyone or for no one. Iran is having none of it. Now, the lunatic Trump is at the same time saying that there were certain rounds of negotiations, and he contradicts himself so much. I don't want to talk, and then he say we had 11 hours talk rounds in Oman, and the Iranians are asking us, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, but the ones who are bad, he's all over the place. If he thinks this is like strategic ambiguity or something, he's a major fool. Likewise with any idiot who still believes in him. But the fact of the matter is, he made a decision. Trump made a decision. And that decision, where it's in his hands or not, because he is at the end of the day the commander-in-chief, he made a decision to try again and force Iran to surrender. And guess what? Iran isn't going to surrender. The free people of the world aren't going to surrender, not just Iran. Iran just happens to be the representation of human dignity now. Iran and its resistance to the neo-colonialist, supremacist, ugly, depraved, disgusting powers who murder children and rape them. He has much more pressing things to do in the United States, Trump, if he wants to protect the American people and American children. Do you know all of that money he spent so far on this war of aggression against Iran? Had he spent that money, and he didn't have to do this, right? He did this for Israel. Had he spent that money in the United States, he would have solved the healthcare problem. He would have solved the poverty. He would have sent free meals for school children. He would have sorted out families that are suffering. He would have solved major issues in the United States for the people who are in need the most. Instead, what does he do? He goes on a war of aggression because he's being blackmailed by a satanic child murdering entity in the form of Israel. And his allies are entertaining it. As in, they're speaking about Iran, as in, how dare Iran respond? They're causing instability. How far is he willing to go? Well, clearly by the movements of the United States lately, they're trying to only control the tempo so that it doesn't get out of hand and they can continuously apply pressure on Iran. That's what they're trying to do, and mislead some in Iran with potential talks, which are clearly now appearing to be a total and absolute waste of time with Donald Trump. It's a complete waste of time. As in, if you ask me, the Iranians are entitled to do whatever they want to do from a political perspective, but from what I'm seeing now, these talks with the United States, you gave the idiot 3 chances when he constantly backstabbed the Iranian people and butchered Iranian children. And clearly the only language that the American administration understands is the language of force. They don't understand any other language. At least when Trump is there. Because listen, let's remember, no matter what you think of any of the American presidents, most of them were vile, despicable murderers. But none of them went to war with Iran. Even when they were requested to go, this idiot did. And that says a lot about him. So in essence, by the way, because, you know, Trump has been talking about Iran potentially assassinating him. The U.S. armed forces would probably be relieved if they hear that Trump has been assassinated. Because he's the one killing them, throwing them into the fire by provoking other countries. It's insane. And you know what it stems from, by the way? A lot of this stems from the neo-colonial, arrogant, racist, supremacist mentality. Nothing else. Look at history. Colonial powers originating from Europe, occupying and butchering the rest of the world and stealing their reserves, their goods, their everything. And then crying when they come and immigrate to Europe, saying, oh no, we don't want immigrants. They're still doing the same thing. They're just coating it with different stuff. Now it's Iran's problem that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. What do you mean Iran's problem? The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Imagine China building a military base on American borders or in Europe somewhere and aiming ballistic missiles against neighboring countries and then complaining once they attack them and they respond. What kind of a delusional mentality is this? What are these people so thick and stupid that they can't see through this? Is there anyone else still not understanding this? Is there anyone convinced that Iran is the problem here. I'm not sure how these people think, or are they so arrogant and delusional that they lost any sort of common sense? Because arrogance comes with ignorance, by the way. These supremacists who think that, so long as it's Western powers attacking other countries, it's fine. Now, and many of the European countries, if not most of them, are on Trump's side, licking his boots when he's swearing at them and humiliating them, whether it's NATO or any of the other countries. Some of them know, some of them, they have limits, right? To an extent, by the way, because none of them cross the red lines when it comes to Israel, especially. And they're a part of the problem. So the demons in Washington, the demons in London, the demons in Berlin are just as bad as the demons in Tel Aviv, simply by entertaining any of this. If they don't take a staunch position against the aggression of the United States against Iran, they will be their people will be facing the same problems at the end of the day. And Iran so far has been restrained. Iran didn't go all out. They always kept some space there. But Trump, by what he's doing, is potentially provoking Iran to have bigger attacks. And who knows, he might go on an even bigger attack against Iran. And don't be surprised if he will use a nuclear bomb, tactical nuclear bombs against Iran. Mind you, the Iranian people will bravely stand up even with his nuclear bombs or not, by the way. Don't worry. Do you remember the human shields that the Iranian people made around their power plants? Talking about a nation of victory or martyrdom. And that's something that no corrupt genocidal pedo will understand. They're not at the same level. However, Trump is clearly willing to. And Netanyahu, on the other hand, is interested in him doing just that. Because so far, Israel is kind of out of the picture. They started this, and they're out of it. So in essence, look at how much they're benefiting. They dragged the United States into a war. They got out, and now the United States is doing the war on its own. Can you imagine that? But that might be short-lived. That might be short-lived because Israel still has certain plans. Trump might do them a favor and attack the power. Don't forget, the power plants are Netanyahu's demand. Power plants, energy sector, that's Netanyahu's demand, no, not Trump. He probably had a conversation with him over the phone instead of a meeting that was due to be scheduled. And Netanyahu threatened him. And now Trump is executing. However, Iran might be in a position where they would voluntarily begin strikes on Israel even if they don't participate. Because the next coming days and potentially weeks are going to be seeing a lot of intensity between both Iran and the United States. And Trump might yet again cross another red line against Iran. And that will make the Iranians have no option but to unleash a much bigger response against the United States.
Reported by independent media. We have with us very experienced, globally recognized authorities to whom we provide the information, and they then give you the information as they deem fit. So I wish to introduce my dear colleagues and friends, Pepe Escobar, Larry Johnson, and please go ahead, Pepe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Z. Thank you, Larry. Thanks all of you, our global audience. Okay, let's go straight to the point. As it stands, there are three absolutely key issues revolving around, we could say maybe the the total death of the previously comatose MOU cat, unless he resuscitates like in one of those American gory thrillers. The cat could always resuscitate, but at the moment it's going to be very, very hard. But okay, let's go to the three absolutely key points, and then we can launch a conversation among us and extending to the possibility within the next few days of some sort of dialogue back on track. Number one, the Majlis, the Iranian parliament, they met yesterday and they voted on two resolutions for an absolutely astonishing 400-0. Okay, resolution number one, demanding the government to accelerate nuclear capabilities. This is on purpose quite vague. It can be interpreted as an acceleration of their uranium enrichment, or it can also be interpreted as an acceleration of the possibility, which is now discussed openly between leader Mojtaba Khamenei and the Supreme National Security Council, of perhaps launching a nuclear test in Iranian soil. This is beyond groundbreaking, of course, but now is part of the Mojtaba era, which, by the way, started only a few days ago, last Friday. On Thursday was the end of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei era in the Islamic Republic, and Mojtaba's era started only a few days ago on Friday. And there are many vectors and I would say carefully calculated leaks pointing to Iran maybe upgrading their game big time as a dissuasive strategy. Number two, and this goes in parallel, Islamabad and Doha, Pakistan and Qatar are starting to talk again from the position of mediators. And this is what they expect. This is what Pakistani and Qatari mediators expect. So we cannot take this at face value, much less as this is going to happen. Talks with Iran might restart between Pakistanis and Qataris this Sunday, so within the next few days. This doesn't mean, of course, that the MOU will be back on track. No, this means that Islamabad and Doha will try to convince Iran to come back to the table, and we still don't know what sort of, I would say, intergalactic arguments they will need to convince Iran that this time the Americans will be serious. And the number three is something that has been evolving for the past few weeks, and in fact, the past 2 months, is the extremely quirky, to say the least, and I'm trying to be very diplomatic here, relationship between Donald Trump and Field Marshal Asim Munir. And point number three is the, okay, to be diplomatic once again, quite quirky relationship between the President of the United States and Field Marshal Asim Munir. Trump continues to call Field Marshal Asim Munir directly. Of course, it's a relationship where they can pick up the phone and call the other party, and there's an immediate response. When it comes to Trump, this does not usually happen. So one of the few foreign players at the highest level who can do that to Trump is Asim Munir. But in this case, Trump is calling the Field Marshal in a practical I would say in a desperation state, trying to influence or trying to suggest quite directly, in fact, to Munir, are you able to find a way out or an off-ramp after himself, Trump, blew up the MOU, at least 9 or 10 points among the 14, so there can be some sort of comeback of negotiations that would not involve what Trump will read as personal humiliation. The problem is, Trump is already personally humiliated by his own actions. So anything that happens, and anything that Asim Munir would convince the Iranians to accept, from an American point of view, it will be a worse MOU than the one that was blew up by the President of the United States. So this is where we are on these 3 main points. And the other point is something, and then I'll pass it over to Larry directly, because Larry has also detailed information about it. The Iranian response to the American bombings these past 2 days, they have been absolutely devastating. And some of it is now surfacing on the net. And in the next few days, the extent of the devastation in these American bases in West Asia is going to become even more obvious to anyone. So with that, Larry, take it away. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Pepe. That's a great intro. So let's first emphasize that the United States now is back on war footing. On June 17th, they dismantled what are called the CATs, different CATs than what Pepe was talking about. These are called crisis action teams. These were set up, before 7 days before the attack on Iran started on the 28th of February. The CATs were set up. These are planning operation cells at the Pentagon, at Central Command, and at other what are called supporting commands. And they operate 24/7. Those after June 17th, after the ceasefire was declared, they went to a 9 to 5, 5-day-a-week schedule, which means they weren't planning combat operations. Now they're back operating 24/7, which means these are significant combat operations. So that's the bad news in terms of the war definitely is back on. However, there is the Iranians enjoy a tremendous advantage over the United States. And it boils down to this. From the north of Keshem Island, I think it's called Bandar-e-Gahem, and then to the south along the coastline around Sikar. That's about 200 miles, 180 miles of coastline. All along that coastline, in our holes in these mountains that rise up out of the sea, from which coastal defense missiles are fired. There are firing positions for drones. So the United States says that its goal is to degrade Iran's ability to attack ships in the Gulf, forgetting that Iran's capabilities are not just in terms of coastal defense cruise missiles that are fired out of those cliffs, or missiles that are fired from fixed positions on Keshem Island and other islands in the Strait of Hormuz, and drones that are launched in the Strait of Hormuz above the aerial drones. There are also underwater drones. There are many submarines capable of launching torpedoes. There are surface level drones. There are combat ships. The point is that the United States is facing 1,000 targets at least 1,000 targets that they would need to try to destroy in order to, quote, degrade Iran's ability to interfere and prevent ships that are not complying with the Persian Gulf Strait Authority protocols that Iran has laid out. But what the United States runs up against is it does not have the air power and it does not have the missiles to be able to handle that mission. And in fact, they think they can destroy one set of drone launchers, and lo and behold, Iran can come out and produce a whole new set within 24 to 48 hours. So in other words, it's like the task of Sisyphus, trying to roll a rock up a hill, always thinking they're reaching the top, and then the rock rolls back down to the bottom. Iran, on the other hand, has a completely different tactical and strategic situation in front of it, one that favors it and to the detriment of the United States. It only has to attack 10 targets, and those targets don't move. The 2 air bases in Jordan, Mawafaq al-Salti and the Prince Hassan Air Base, that's where U.S. aircraft and refueling tankers are operating from. All Iran has to do is hit those day after day after day after day, cluster munitions, ballistic missiles, drones, and at some point, those bases become uninhabitable, and the ability of the United States to continue attacking Iran will cease. Similarly, the airfield at Al Udeid in Qatar, the Isa airfield, Al Isa airfield in Bahrain, the Ali Salam Air Base in Kuwait, the Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, Duqm, a logistics resupply center for U.S. aircraft carriers. All of these are now on the target list, and will add Erbil, which is under attack as we speak, by Iranian forces, taking out U.S. Headquarters, U.S. Positions, U.S. warehouses. So within this battle, Iran holds the decisive edge, and it will compel the United States at some point. I don't know if it's this week, next week, or the week after, but the United States is now faced with a situation of trying to escalate where it does not have the weapon systems to escalate. The Tomahawk missile, the JASSM missile, those are in short supply. There were reports in the first few days that the HIMARS were being used to launch rockets or missiles. There are only 3 types of missiles that the HIMARS can launch. One is called a ground launch multiple rocket system. That only goes about 50 miles, so that's not used. It can, if you fire it from Bahrain or Kuwait, it's not even going to reach Iranian territory. That leaves ATACMS. Well, ATACMS sounds good, except if you fire it from Bahrain, the range from Bahrain to Bandar Abbas barely reaches Bandar Abbas. So it's limited, and its numbers are limited, which leaves us with the precision strike munition, the brand new missile to replace the ATACMS. And guess what? For fiscal year 2026, Lockheed Martin has produced a grand total of 56. I'll repeat that, 56. If that's what they're shooting at Iran, they're going to be done in a week, easy. If they're firing 7 a day. So the point is, the United States, with the Tomahawk, is limited in supply. The JASSM missile, another joint air strike, surface strike missile. All of those are dependent upon rare earth minerals that come out of China. That the supply chain's disrupted. The factories in the United States cannot produce these by the hundreds in a month. They produce them by the dozens in a month, if that. So here is the United States now attacking Iranian positions with missiles and weapon systems that are running out of supply. And there is no way for the United States to reverse that. So this is a case where all Iran has to do is hang on, hang in there, keep pounding away at the U.S. positions. They don't have to go looking for a wide variety. They just have to hit 10. If you can hit 10 day after day after day after day, you reach a point where the United States can no longer sustain that operation and will be desperately seeking talks to reestablish, reignite the MOU. But I think where we are, and this reinforces the point that Pepe was making, the Iranian people are fed up. And the chance that were heard in Qom, the chants that were heard in Mashhad were Entachem, Entachem, revenge, revenge. They don't want negotiation. They don't want compromise. The Iranian people want revenge. They want the United States to pay for the blood of the martyrs.
Excellent, Larry. And this ties up completely with the intel that we're receiving that Trump is desperately calling us Simon year nonstop to try to find an off-ramp. Because obviously somebody at the Pentagon may have explained what you just explained to all of us on a typical Trumpian soundbite that he could understand. You're going to run out of weaponry in a matter of a few days, even before you run out of strategic petroleum reserves. So this is the language that Trump may understand, right? Mr. Z, you want to add something, or you want to clarify something, or you want to add?
Well, I want to clarify a few points. Yes. I want to clarify a couple of points because they are freshly reported out of our contacts that we believe are totally reliable, and they are that the Majlis met after many months. I'm told they met just last night, our time. And they passed 2 resolutions.
Yeah, but we talked about that at the beginning.
But the vote was 400-0.
Yes, but we already talked about that.
Yes, and secondly, Pakistan has opened up, which did not talk about this, multiple corridors for Iran, multiple corridors where transit is already taking place of goods, including oil. Not only to Pakistan, but to certain favored countries, including that from the deep sea port of Gwadar. So Iran is not isolated. Iran is not in a hurry. They have patience on their side. They are capable of absorbing punishment, but the United States is not. So who knows what got into his head that allowed Trump to embark on this most recent foolishness. I mean, I obviously cannot understand that, and people I speak with don't understand that. You are experts at understanding the stupidity of Trump, so maybe you can understand what exactly got into his head that caused him to behave in this fashion, because it is utterly foolish.
I prefer to go back to what's happening in Tehran, with Moshtaba in power, solidifying his new year, the beginning of his new era. The fact that his original understanding of the MOU was absolutely correct. And this is something that he said only a few days ago. Before he delegated this the decision to engage with the MOU, he delegated the decision to the Supreme National Security Council as long as they had a solid majority. But he made a point among the tight inner circle that this was not his priority, meaning he never believed that the MOU would be fulfilled by the US and the American commitments would be followed. So in this aspect, he was essentially behaving like his dad. Khamenei over and over again in public and in private always said, no, it's absolutely impossible to negotiate with the Americans. And he knew by experience, by all his years in power. Moshtaba learned in absolutely adversarial conditions, with Iran being attacked in the middle of a war, when part of his family was decimated by an American strike, and his position has been vindicated. So what Larry has just mentioned once again, the absolutely unbelievable scenes that we witnessed last week in this Shiite arc. It was Tehran and Qom, the spiritual capital, but also Najaf and Karbala, 2 spiritual capitals in Iraq, and in the end, Mashhad, which is still another religious spiritual capital in eastern Iran, where Ayatollah Khamenei was buried. Revenge. But this can be interpreted conceptually and in terms of Shiite theology as a long struggle. And it can also be interpreted in pedestrian terms that, yes, we have a clear mark on you. And something is going to happen to the people who attacked us on February 28th. So this can be interpreted in many different ways. But the most important thing is that the decisions of Mojtaba take into consideration the verdict from the streets. And we're talking about 40 million people. This is unheard of in the history of, in the modern era, or perhaps centuries behind us. So this will guide the next steps in terms of Iranian resistance, in terms of Iranian resistance, let's say the next 10 days or so, assuming American bombing will continue like Trump is advertising every night and very hard until they ran out of munitions. And of course, this imperils completely this possible new Tehran, Islamabad, Ankara, Doha alignment in terms of having some sort of the remains of the MOU that kept back on the negotiation table. So this is where we are. We are once again in a very dangerous crossroads. And of course, the President of the United States is advancing his own demise by his actions after blowing up a memorandum of understanding that he signed and he committed to fulfill. And obviously, he didn't listen to what the Iranians have been saying from the beginning. Now, commitments are bilateral. You break it, we also break it. And you have to live with the consequences.
Yeah.
Add,
and what we're, again, Z, what we're looking at here now is Iran has laid down two markers in the past. They've said that if the United States continues these attacks, that they will close the Bab el-Mandab Strait and that they will revoke Iran's participation in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's been interesting in the last couple of days following the Saudi attack on Sana'a and the airfield in Sana'a, and then the Houthis' immediate response, retaliating against two air bases in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis appear to have backed down now, or maybe they're licking their wounds, trying to figure out what they do next. But the fact of the matter is, they have backed down. They are not pursuing or stepping up the attacks, because I think they recognize that if they do so, that the Houthis can inflict a lot more damage on them, particularly taking out their oil at Yanbu. And
East-West pipeline.
Yeah, so that East-West pipeline will be disrupted. So you've got that. If we do see the Majlis in Tehran vote to withdraw from the MOU, then I think that will be the clearest sign that Iran has decided that the fatwa of Ali Khamenei no longer applies, that their only guaranteed path to future security is to have a nuclear weapon, one that will potentially put both the United States and Israel at bay and put them in the same position that North Korea is right now. And I know that cuts against the grain of a lot of the analysis from the intelligence community in the past. But I think the situation has changed, as even Professor Morandi has noted in his conversations in recent weeks with people in the streets. They have been, there's a growing sense that we have to have a nuke, because if we don't have a nuke, we don't have security. We're not going to be safe. And so the quest for security, I think, is going to be a primary focus for the Majlis going forward. And frankly, U.S. attacks, the continued killing of Iranian citizens by the United States is just going to reinforce this feeling that we cannot surrender. There's nothing we can do to the United States. We tried. We signed an MOU. They broke every single point in that MOU. They violated every single one. And instead of accepting responsibility for what they did, they tried to blame us. So this is where I think we're really at a crossroads now.
Absolutely.
Well, I
Larry.
wanted to
Just go ahead, because I want to finish my participation with a very, very simple remark. In fact, coming back to the beginning of this channel, which was called Power Shift, and then it was disconnected by some forces from above. One of our breaking news in the less than a week that we lasted was centered around a phone call by the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, to Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Pakistan, where Pezeshkian was basically saying it or sending a message to the Americans via the Pakistanis: look, if you continue like this, we may be testing a nuclear device on Iranian soil, as basically marking our new deterrence path. So, as the only way for Mujtaba to, in fact, imprint the new era now, under extreme circumstances, and considering that he has the support of virtually the whole population of Iran, that's it. Okay, let's finally revert the original fatwa by Ayatollah Khomeini, the fatwa by my dad. He's not going to put it in these terms, of course. And of course, we enter a new era of deterrence, because this is the only way that the Americans will understand that we are really, really serious in terms of preserving our sovereignty and our independence. And one thing we may be sure, the whole global South will understand the Iranian position if push comes to shove. Well,
what I was going to add to the same point, Pepe, that my contacts tell me that with the most recent, which is last night, passage of the resolution demanding that Iran make progress on its nuclear competency capabilities, they have put the ball back into the court of Mujtaba Khamenei. And Mujtaba Khamenei and his very, very tight inner circle are the only ones who are now in a position to decide if they're going to go and do what they informed Pezeshkian they were going to do about 2 weeks ago, before the MOU was finally drafted and signed, and communicated on our channel through our own reporting by Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Ishaq Dar, directly to Marco Rubio, and then there was progress on the MOU. So I'm told that if this continues, the present escalation continues beyond Sunday, the specific marker date, because Pakistan and Qatar are going to be talking in a very intense way with the Iranian counterparts, taking with them all the whatever Asim Munir has heard from Trump, privately, that is, that please get me out of this situation, and see whether or not Iran is willing to listen. They will gauge that on this coming Sunday, the weekend. So if this continues into the next week, my contacts believe that Mujtaba will be very close to giving the green light to what we reported about 3 weeks ago. And that will completely change the dynamics of what is going on, and permanently put an end to the constant desire of Israel and the United States to keep on attacking Iran. They don't want that anymore. So this is where we are at.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry, you want to wrap up?
Yep. Well, just say that we'll continue to watch what happens with the daily exchange of fire between Iran and the United States. But Iran is not, it's going to remain in its, what I'll call its reprisal role. They get hit by the United States, they'll hit back, and they'll hit back harder. And the reality in this is that the United States has less ability to absorb these blows than does Iran. So the United States made a fatal error in rejecting and failing to adhere to the MOU. I will make my own prediction that Iran will not return to the negotiating table unless they've got firm, ironclad guarantee that when they return, the frozen assets that have been frozen will be unfrozen and turned over then, not at some unspecified date in the future. That the sanctions will be lifted then, not at some unspecified date in the future. Those would be the two critical issues. And that Iran, whether the United States likes it or not, is going to remain in control of the Strait of Hormuz and will continue to, and will now, I think now, start collecting the fee that it agreed to wait 60 days. The other thing I guess we forgot to mention is what Hezbollah will do, because Hezbollah it followed the MOU, and under the MOU, Hezbollah was to cease attacks on Israel, which it did. Now, as Iran said, we are unbound by the MOU. The same applies to Hezbollah, and I anticipate we'll see Hezbollah beginning to retaliate against the Israeli attacks.
Absolutely. And just, I would say the cherry on this volatile cake, the Bab al-Mandeb card has not even been played yet.
Yes.
Yes.
It's in reserve. It's an escalation reserve by Iran, for which the United States has no solution, none whatsoever. So I have no idea what's going to happen.
It's not a card by Iran. It's a card by Yemen. I've been to Yemen last year. They are completely independent. They are in close connection with Iran. But the Iranian decision, the Yemeni decisions are made in Sana'a and in Sada, the seat of and the birthplace of Ansarallah in the north. Only when you go there and you talk to them, you understand how prepared they are, how technologically evolved they are, and how this is a very, very sophisticated civilization. According to Prophet Muhammad, the real Islam has always been in Yemen. So don't mess with them. They are just watching the river flow for the moment, to quote our dear friend Bob Dylan.
They are 2,000 years old civilization. And somebody in this country has the audacity, the stupidity, the hubris of thinking that they can be wiped out through some communication happening on a Telegram channel. I mean, this is how backwards we are. But in any case, from what I'm told, they are very, very tightly aligned with Iran. They're not going to do anything to jeopardize what Iran is doing, and they will do everything in support of Iran. This is my understanding, and that is something that I do not know whether Hexet or Trump understand. So what is your, I mean, before we go and perhaps wrap it up for the weekend, hopefully nothing, worse happens on the weekend. What is your estimation, Pepe, on how this thing resolves?
No crystal ball. We're waiting. We deal with facts. We look at the facts, mountains of fact, interconnected facts. We shall wait. The problem is we depend on a very practical level and on a naming names base. Apparently, we depend on Erdogan and Simonir to instill some sense into the 4-year-old psychotic brain of the President of the United States. So I'm not sure this is a wonderful prospect ahead of us. But there's not another one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well,
go figure. Follow me.